Chapter 41. Two Choices. Evan was sound asleep, but he woke up when his phone began to ring. He saw Jack's name on the screen and was instantly wide awake. The professor would only call at 2 in the morning if there was some type of emergency. Accepting the call, Evan sat up in bed. "What's wrong?" he asked anxiously. Jack spilled out the distressing story while he watched Odin and Franz take down a swing and wind up the rope. Briefly and urgently, he relayed the scheme he'd overheard the boys plotting. "What do we do, Evan?" he pleaded. "The internet has corrupted their minds." The internet isn't the source of the problem, Evan argued, based on his new understanding. Our own hearts are bent to evil, all of us. Odin and Franz have inflamed their lust with what they've chosen to view, but they may have come up with a plan like this without ever finding the phone. "But what do we do now? Should we confine them to the nursery?" How would we get them to go in there? They hate the nursery. "I know," Jax despaired, imagining the scene. "We'd need to ask several of the young men to capture them and force them in. There's no way they would willingly enter the doors." "They have weapons," Evan recalled. "They could end up taking other innocent lives." "But to leave them in paradise means that every night and every day from now on, we will have to have someone on guard to ensure they don't carry out their plan. And if we don't think of a way to stop this, it may be carried out tonight. How can we warn anyone this late at night? How can we stop it from happening?" "We have to stop it immediately," Evan agreed. "We can't let anyone be taken captive like this. If Odin and Franz have given themselves over to selfish, harmful actions like this, I'd say they've chosen their destiny." "What do you mean?" "We will give them what they want," Evan suggested. "Quoi?" The professor frowned, watching Franz coil the rope around his arm. "Evan?" "They've always wanted to break out of paradise," Evan reminded him. "I think it's time to let them go free." "But they'll die." Although, he pondered thoughtfully, they stole Louis's spare oxygen tanks, so they'll have an extra hour. "We could allow them to experience the big world in the train supply room, and then confront them," Evan suggested. "If they see the tunnel doors open, I'm sure they'll go in. We can give them the choice of confinement in the nursery, or perhaps we could oxygenate the supply room, and they could become our loaders and stockers." The professor considered the idea, his mind racing. Keeping a wary eye on the young man as they snuck out of the forest, he thought it through. "Confinement in the nursery is safer," he reasoned. "Louis grew up in isolation and turned out well. And maybe Odin and Franz just need a little more empathy and persuasion. If they see that I am real, they may be convinced to change." "True. But I'd love to put them to work," Evan stated. "I think it would benefit them to lose their freedom and be required to labor all day long until they appreciate how fantastic their life used to be. Based on their ongoing harmful actions with no real remorse, they have lost their privilege to live in paradise. For now. We don't want to force the other tinies to confront them or be harmed by their actions, and we don't want anyone to take justice into their own hands." Thinking of all the significant controls in the supply room that could possibly be reached with enough time and ingenuity, the professor didn't like the train loading scenario. He explained his concerns to Evan, fretting, "They are too smart. We just can't risk them finding their way back into paradise unreformed. I think private counseling in the nursery is the best option. But," he considered, "I like your idea of allowing them to explore, just so they realize we have been protecting them, not depriving them. We could let them experience the effects of low oxygen." "I like that," Evan agreed. "They need to feel it, to believe it." "Then get here as fast as you can," the professor called out, dashing toward the elevator passageway. He ran through the tunnel that led to the supply room. He could see the troublemakers had gathered supplies and were now heading toward the meadow. Pressing the button to open the train entrance, the professor desperately hoped the foolish young men would see their chance to escape and choose this option over the other. As the gates creaked open, the professor ran to the window in the viewing tunnel. He gazed anxiously through the dark pane. Odin was the first to hear the noise, and he turned around curiously. "Well, well! Would you look at that?" he exclaimed. "The entrance just opened up, and the train isn't coming through. This is our lucky night. Let's make her escape! The breeze picked up, programmed as it was to intensify after the rain. Franz wasn't so easily diverted. But we have a better plan, he argued, pushing back his thin, straggly hair that was now blowing across his face. Maybe the gate opens every night at this time. We can escape tomorrow night. Or maybe Evan is watching us. Are you kidding? Odin mocked. He's sound asleep in bed like everyone else. I'd say something has malfunctioned with that door. Becoming agitated, Odin was anxious to seize the opportunity. Look, I've been waiting for this to happen all my life, he considered eagerly. There's no way it happens every night. This is a chance occurrence. We've got to take it, Franz. We have oxygen tanks in the den. Come on, we're so prepared. What are you worried about oxygen for? You said that was just a big lie to keep us in the cage. It is, I'm sure of it. But, well, just in case it isn't. The two looked at each other long and hard as they deliberated what to do. A tree fell over in the fun forest with a loud thump. Both Tinies turned to look. Ah, that's the one we hope to attach the new bridge to, Franz fretted. What's wrong with these dumb trees? Everything is getting wrecked around here, Odin complained. If there is a professor, he sure doesn't know what's going on. For a moment, the two Tinies looked back and forth between the farmland and the tunnel. On the other side of the window, the professor hoped with all his heart that they would choose the tunnel. I'm going, Odin declared, turning around. It will be so much better in the big world. There'll be plenty of girls, cars, and freedom. I'm getting those tanks. Franz stood still for a moment, wavering between the options. As Odin ran off, he threw the rope down angrily and followed his friend. The professor breathed a huge sigh of relief. On his phone, he found his control apps and video access to the supply room security system. Once the toggle switch was ready and visible on his screen, he waited breathlessly. With the oxygen tanks under his arms and the mass trailing behind him, Odin ran to the tunnel. Reluctantly, Franz followed. As soon as he saw them step inside the supply room, the professor hit the switch. In a moment, the foolish Tinies found themselves well and truly on the other side of paradise. The gate closed behind them. Evan burst through the office door, joining the professor in the viewing tunnel. Quietly, they watched the Tinies on Jack's screen. It just closed, Fran's anxious voice called out. Odin was looking around curiously in the dim lighting. This looks like the store, he observed. It's full of supplies. We'll have to remember this room, just in case. It's so dark in here, Franz complained. I hate that red light. It's eerie. So many lies. Everyone lies, Odin fretted. Ponzi said it was so bright that he couldn't see. Maybe it's bright in the daytime. The only way to figure things out is to see it for yourself, Odin muttered. No one can be trusted. Walking back and forth on the train tracks that ran along the shelf, Odin assured his partner, We'll find a way out. This isn't the big world. Maybe it's behind that door. It's such a gigantic door. First, we have to get down to the ground. Franz ran back inside the train tunnel. The scientists heard loud thumping on the tunnel entrance gate. Looking over at the professor, Evan whispered, I think he's trying to get back in. Maybe 10 minutes will be long enough, the professor replied compassionately. He looked at his phone. It was 2:30 in the morning. At 2:40, we'll confront them. 10 minutes seemed like 2 hours as the Tinies began to panic. Hollering profanities back and forth at each other, Franz was angry that Odin had spoiled their plans for the night, just to lead them into a dark, confined storage room. Odin fell from one shelf to another with a dull thud. He cried out in pain. Worried for his safety, the professor opened the door 1 minute early and turned on the light. The two runaways screamed in terror when the scientists appeared like massive, dark giants filling the enormous doorway. Once the young men recognized Evan, they calmed down. Looking directly at the professor, Odin demanded, Who are you? Folding his arms across his chest, Jax replied with a smile, I'm the one you've been waiting to meet. I'm the professor, the mastermind of paradise. Why are you here, Odin? I've broken out of your cage, the stocky tiny stated angrily. You have indeed, the professor agreed, and you won't be going back for a long while. What do you mean? Franz challenged anxiously. You're going to leave us here? I prepared a safe and beautiful place for you in paradise, the professor responded calmly. I gave you everything you needed to enjoy life, but you despised it. You have damaged my world in the past and hurt my family. I heard your evil plans tonight. I am not going to allow you to harm any more of my children. But your world knows about us, Odin taunted. I've seen us on YouTube. You're in enormous trouble for putting us in that cage. The governing board will be on our side. You chose to escape, the professor reminded him, although he did wonder what the governing board might say. No one forced you out. Kneeling down closer to their level, Evan smiled. So we have two choices for you. You can go into the nursery where it's safe, or Odin was defiant. No way! I wouldn't go back in there if my life depended on it. And besides, we've been totally fine without mass. That oxygen thing is just another big lie, isn't it? Looking at his friend for confirmation, the hefty tiny scoffed. Do you feel any different? Not at all, Franz retorted. Crossing his arms, Odin turned back to the professor. You've been telling us lies to keep us in that cage, he shouted. You didn't make enough girls or give us a big enough world. I don't like being in your experiment. We want to see the real world. I want to drive cars and travel to a city. Evan nodded calmly. You have about half an hour more until you'll feel the effects of the lack of oxygen, he said. We are telling you the truth. But if you don't want to live safely in the nursery, your other choice is to explore the rainforest next door. With the oxygen bottles, you may last another hour or two. Concerned for their safety, the professor piped up. But we'll warn you that in the rainforest you may be eaten or stepped on if you stray from the path. Wild animals and birds roam in the cages next door. And they are our size, not yours, Evan reminded them. I killed the spider, Odin protested bravely. I'm not afraid. Franz shouted frantically, This is a mistake. I want to go back to paradise. Please, please may I go back? The professor shook his head. No, you may not. Not while you're making harmful plans for others, like what I overheard tonight. Swearing at Odin, Franz shouted, This was the dumbest idea you've ever had. We should never have left. I'm going to kill you. It wasn't just my idea, Odin retorted. You suggested. So what will it be? The professor interrupted. An hour or two of exploration in the big rainforest world, or life in the nursery? Not the nursery, Odin grumbled to Franz. The oxygen thing is definitely a lie. Don't let them mislead you. We're feeling fine. Let's go explore. With some more deliberation and hateful remarks about the boring nursery, both Tinies finally agreed. They wanted to see the big world. Evan picked up the Tinies. In a compassionate gesture, the professor grabbed 2 building boards from the shelves and handed them to the tiny, brave warriors. Remembering that they had killed the spider with the sticks, he thought it would give them some protection. Accepting the gift with an ungrateful shrug, Franz scoffed. Should have brought my bow and arrow. What good is a dumb stick? Odin and Franz stood tall in Evan's hand as he strode through the hall to the office door. Once he stepped into the beautiful glass biosphere, they gazed around in amazement. All the displays were softly lit, and moonlight shone through the magnificent glass greenhouse enclosure above. For a few moments, the Tinies were speechless. I'm going to give you a tour, Evan said, glancing quickly at the professor. Motioning with his hand, Jax let him know they had approximately 20 minutes left till the lack of oxygen would begin to affect the young men. Walking through the mirrored hall, Evan took them to see the monkeys, which started a howling racket that woke up all the other animals. Franz was initially terrified by the loud noise and clung fearfully to Evan's sleeve, but Odin's jeers soon had the lanky young man standing stoically tall. One monkey jumped from tree to tree, and both the Tinies gasped. Wow, that is awesome, Odin exclaimed. I'd love to do that. What did you call those creatures? Howler monkeys, Evan replied. There are a few spider monkeys, too. They are most active in the mornings. The large cats in the next exhibit were only barely visible in their dark caves. Disturbed by the visitors and the noisy monkeys, the jaguar's eyes glared at them from his safe haven. He growled angrily. He's not so friendly, Odin remarked. Franz was in awe. I didn't know cats grew so big. They aren't house cats like the ones you have in paradise, Evan explained. These cats could actually harm someone my size if they were free. Are there any friendly animals in here? Franz asked, his voice wavering. Not for a tiny, Evan replied. You'd be a tasty morsel for most of the wildlife we have in here, but we interact with them on a regular basis. Let's show them the lizards, Jack suggested, feeling they were running short of time. Now this is more like it, Odin shouted as he approached the cascading water near the reptile cafe. Soft colored lights lit up the plummeting water in a brilliant, ever-changing display. What a gigantic waterfall, the stocky tiny exclaimed. And look at the colors. See, Franz, it's just like we thought. It's so much better than paradise. It is, he agreed. Odin was fascinated by the lizards, having never seen anything like them before. Illuminated by the continuous color exhibit, the iguana's scales shimmered in the dancing light. What is that long rope-like creature? Franz asked suddenly. The large rope-like creature was in a glass enclosure of its own. Soundlessly it slithered forward, coiling effortlessly around the branch over their heads. A little light reflected off its beady eyes, and its forked tongue sensed the air. That is a snake, Evan told him. I'd stay far away from him if I were you. They are all in cages, right? Franz asked warily. Yes, Evan assured him. If you stay on the pathway, you won't be eaten. But don't enter any cages. And if you're still here in the morning, I'd advise you to stay off the pathways, or you could be stepped on by other people like us. Cages. More cages, Odin complained. If anyone sees us, they'll help us escape, he boasted. We'll tell them how bad it is in paradise, and they'll force you to let everyone out. Then all the tinies can go exploring. Good thinking, Franz agreed. This time they'll all thank us. You might want to investigate this tunnel on your own, Evan suggested, as he lowered the tinies to the ground near the insect and spider display. Since the creatures inside were so small, the glass enclosures held no minuscule gaps that the tinies could slip into. With a smile he said, After all, Odin is the spider hero. Enjoy your tour, guys. I'd get those oxygen masks on if I were you, the professor warned. You may not be feeling the effects just yet, but you will very soon. If we need them, we'll put them on, Odin said defiantly, waving his building board from side to side like a club. You're just trying to make us afraid with all these useless warnings. But I'm not afraid of anything. Leaving the courageous tinies on the walkway, the professor and Evan sat down at one of the cafe tables, waiting for the inevitable. Unwilling to lug around the heavy oxygen tanks, the boys entered the tunnel without them. Dim white lights lit up the various floor-to-ceiling displays. A large tarantula had attached itself inside the glass wall in close view. That spider is taller than us, Franz remarked in awe. And he's in a cage too, Odin retorted loudly. Is everything in a cage around here? This is not freedom. Where are the cars and all the people? That's what I want to see. For 10 minutes, the scientists could hear the young men alternatively marveling and complaining as they strode by the various exhibits. There were tidy rows of unique butterfly chrysalis, a Goliath bird-eating spider, jumping spiders, and bullet ants. They heard Franz protest. I don't see cars or girls. It's just one dumb spider after another. This is so boring. Why did we escape? Another angry argument broke out. The professor looked at his phone. The tinies had been without enriched oxygen for 35 minutes. Glancing at Evan, he showed him the time. Suddenly, they heard Odin call out, Are your hands shaking? And my arms, Franz replied wearily. I don't feel so well. We better go back and get those tanks, Odin murmured. Oh no. Now my knees are starting to shake. Hurry, Franz, hurry. Standing up, the two researchers knew the young men were beginning to feel the effects. They had seen this happen with animals several times in their years of experimentation. They knew that if intervention didn't occur quickly, major seizures would soon take place, followed by unconsciousness and death. The tinies didn't make it back for the tanks. Overcome by the lack of oxygen and too far away to get relief, they succumbed to seizures on the floor. Scooping up their trembling bodies into his hands, the professor hurried over to the mirrored hallway and took the drop floor exit. With Evan on his heels, they raced through, fumbling codes and opening doors until they reached the back side of the nursery. Sliding the young man in through an unlocked exit, Jax laid their limp bodies on the floor and sealed the nursery shut. Striding forward to the controls, he and Evan made sure that everything was in functional order, checking the oxygen levels, filling up the Wonder Drink machines, and turning on the security cameras. It's never been used as a jail before, Evan pondered. I hope we don't have any weak spots they can break out of. Oh la la, if we have a weak spot, they will find it, Jax murmured. Unfortunately, it will be to their own peril, without any fast cars or girls. What's your plan with them? Evan queried as they watched the young man slowly recover and begin to realize where they were. Odin groaned. Not the nursery. This is worse than death. I believe we should try to counsel them, Jax replied. Let's give them a few days in isolation, and then maybe they'll be receptive to some heart-to-heart talks. As the scientists turned off the hallway lights and followed the underground exit, they discussed the various online programs they could use to help the young man break free from the destructive mental habits they had developed. They knew there were many available. The professor was also determined to find productive ways to harness their brilliant, energetic minds. Maybe, if Franz knows he's my son, he'll be motivated to try harder. Possibly, but then how does that make Odin feel? Evan deliberated. I think they both need to know who their heavenly father is. He is a father they share. Nothing has motivated me to change more than coming to know there is a creator God who loves me dearly and yet calls me to account for my actions. Jax looked over uneasily. Yet deep down he knew Evan was right. Opening the door to such knowledge was already having an impact on his own life. Stepping outside into the very early, mild May morning, the researchers breathed a huge sigh of relief. This time, they had stopped the schemers before any harm had occurred to anyone else. Yet, there were changes to be made. Jax realized he needed to increase restrictions on the source of good and evil that streamed freely through the device in the cave, and more importantly, educate all the tinies to choose wisely. And they were both fully aware that even if new measures were put in place, the tinies had entered a phase of maturity where those who chose to do good could do much good in many ways, but those who loved evil could ruin the beautiful, serene world for everyone. With or without the internet, one tiny choosing to live in a selfish, perverse way could be just as frightening and dangerous as any of the poisonous creatures in the rainforest biome. Evan was convinced more than ever that a force of good was necessary to counter the cravings of fallen human nature. Entering his car, he took a moment to pray. He was so thankful that their intervention had been successful, and that God's word, the true source of goodness, was being actively read and shared in the Paradise Dome. Chapter 42. In the Cave. Inside the beautiful dome world on that rather gray morning, no one noticed the missing tinies for the first few hours. It was quite normal for Odin and Franz to skip breakfast. At lunch, Ponzi and Lily mentioned that they thought it was strange their friends were still sleeping in. When they went to check on the den, it was empty. Damien found rope coils lying on the edge of the forest. Lily was very upset that her new swing had been cut down. By mid-afternoon, Those from the Fun Forest had searched all the forests and the cabins, and Lily had even secretly visited the cave. Amy, Zahir, and Uncle Louie were outside the mansion on the deck, telling Kenzie a few more things they had discovered online about the Bible, when a breathless Lily and Ponzi ran up to them. We're really worried about Odin and Franz, the freckled petite girl panted anxiously. We can't find them anywhere. Ponzi added, We've searched all their hiding spots, and they are nowhere in the forest. Are any boats missing? Uncle Louie asked, sitting comfortably beside Zahir on the bench swing. Lily turned to Ponzi. That's it. Maybe they've taken a boat out. Maybe they are fishing. I doubt it, Ponzi frowned. Hey, why not? Zahir interjected with a wry grin. What could be more fun than fishing? Ponzi laughed. Let's go check, Lily called out, running off with Ponzi close behind. The conversation on the veranda switched back to the evidence they had discovered and the action Uncle Louie had taken based on the hope he felt was real, true, and intensely satisfying. Sitting on the deck beside Amy, Kenzie wanted to know more. For the rest of the afternoon, the deep conversation was occasionally punctuated by Lily and Ponzi's unsuccessful quest to find their missing friends. After dinner, Uncle Louie suggested to the new leaders that they should report the absence to the professor. I can't come with you tonight, he remarked sadly. It's too much effort. But my search is complete. I'm content that I've found truth. A few rainbows danced on Uncle Louie's blanket as the sun suddenly shone through the clouds and the breeze intensified. Looking up, he saw a remarkable rainbow high in the sky, above the crisscross black lines. Look at that, he pointed out. Amy jumped up to view it away from the veranda roof. It's enormous, she exclaimed. It must be raining in the professor's world, the older man remarked quietly. We haven't read about the rainbow yet. It's in the next chapter. Of which book? Zahir inquired curiously. God's book, Uncle Louie smiled. In Genesis. The rainbow was a special sign of God's promise to never flood the earth again, he relayed. He reminded them of a hot day when the rainmaker had helped to cool things off, producing a beautiful arch of color above the hill, which is why it had been named Rainbow Hill. Uncle Louie explained, God intended us to see the rainbow and remember that he made a covenant between himself and all the people on the earth. A covenant he expects us both to keep. This was the first promise he made after the flood destroyed the world that was full of violent and wicked imaginations. God has promised not to flood the earth in this way again, but that doesn't mean we are free to do what we like. He has bound the whole earth in this covenant with him, and he remembers his part of the agreement every time he sees the bow. If we turn away from him and his laws, we are breaking our part of the covenant. That makes it extra special, Amy declared, watching the huge arch in the sky begin to fade away. All these little rainbows can remind us of God, too. Zahir jumped up from the bench. I'll go read the chapter, he suggested eagerly. You'll hear me from the window. The others sat outside and listened while Zahir read about Noah leaving the ark and God's promises to his newly cleansed world. The sky was a dark, smoky gray when the young man came back down to the veranda. There were still shouts and laughter coming from Rose's Hill. Zahir looked over at Kenzie. You'll come with us tonight? He begged. For sure, Kenzie said. The young man assisted Uncle Louie up to the crisis room and helped him get ready for bed. Amy gave him his medicine. Zahir covered him with a blanket. Thank you for today, Uncle Louie smiled, reaching out to clasp Zahir's scarred arm since he was still close by. I'm so thankful for all of you. I know you will do well. Stand strong on the foundation we've discovered. Don't forget how much I love you and that your Heavenly Father loves you even more. I want to see you in the world to come. Amy came over and pressed her face close to his. Good night, Uncle Louie, she said kindly. I love you too. Kenzie and Zahir shook his hands affectionately. With the key in his pocket, Zahir led the way through the dark forest, over fallen trees, and down into the valley. Having been overcast all day, darkness had settled in early. Opening the door, he turned on the lights. Immediately, he noticed the messy state of the phone. "Someone is definitely coming in here when they shouldn't," he said. "I wonder if the professor discovered anything last night." "But how are they getting in?" Amy puzzled. "There was only one key, and it's been with you." Kenzie looked around curiously while Amy wiped the phone clean and turned it on. Since the device hadn't been shut down properly the night before, a disturbing image came up on the screen. Zahir immediately swiped it away. "Is this what they were looking at?" he exclaimed in disgust. "Is this poison?" It wasn't the introduction they had hoped to give Kenzie. However, they had already explained so much about their communications with the professor that their guest was well aware of what the device could do. Amy and Kenzie sat down in the chairs. Zahir hesitated. Picking up the empty chair next to Amy, he brought it around to the other side of Kenzie. "What are you doing?" Kenzie frowned, with a slight chuckle of amusement. "I don't want you looking at my bad side," he laughed. "But it doesn't matter to me," Amy protested. "Or me," Kenzie stated. "It does to me," Zahir mumbled. Giving her dark-haired friend a quizzical look of dismay, Amy reached out to make a video call to the professor. "This is nice and early," the professor remarked when he came on the screen. "I hoped I would hear from you today." "And good evening, Kenzie," he smiled, a little unsure of how to understand the seating arrangements. "I'm glad you're joining us." Kenzie was in complete awe. "Thank you," he sputtered. "I'm really thankful to be invited." Amy told him of Odin and Fran's disappearance. Zahir explained the state of the phone. "I know all about it," the professor acknowledged sadly. "Look around the room and see if you can find a hidden entrance." In alarm, the three tinies perused the room. Kenzie thought to look under the table that was covered with a cloth. "There's a tunnel here," he called out. "As I thought," the professor replied. "At least 4 tinies have been entering the cave with or without the key for the last 2 months." The news was astonishing to Amy, but so many things made sense now. The messy phone, Lily's nightly excursions, the dirt in her roommate's hair. "First things first," the professor smiled. "The phone is no longer a secret, so I'd like to suggest that we put security measures into the system. Then you'll never need to worry about someone else finding the key or creeping through the tunnel. And if you want to share information on the phone with others, you can choose to do so in accountable ways." All 3 liked the idea, so the professor gave them various options to lock the screen and asked which one they thought would be best. Zahir spoke up. "Let's do the face recognition," he suggested. "Anything else might be guessed in time or seen if we invite others and have to type it in." "Yours or Amy's?" "Amy's, of course," Zahir replied, before she could say otherwise. Working together, they set up the new system and ensured the phone would only turn on when Amy stood in front of it. Returning to their seats, the professor slowly broke the distressing news about what had happened the night before. He explained the things that he had overheard and gave them a basic idea of the types of sites that had been visited. When he told them about the threat to the girls, Amy trembled. Had Zahir not been sitting so far away, she would certainly have reached out for his hand. Instead, she clasped Kenzie's arm tightly. Looking over at her with concern, Kenzie's freckled face was very drawn and white. Zahir looked over as well, and then he sharply turned away. "I know this is disturbing information," Jax apologized, seeing the dismay on all their faces. "But as leaders, these will be some of the things you will face and need to decide how to manage in the future." They all agreed that the decision to allow the tinies to escape had been the right one, and Amy was secretly very thankful that Odin and Franz weren't coming back anytime soon. Anxiously, Zahir asked the professor, "What would we have done if you hadn't overheard their plan? What if Odin and Franz had actually carried it out? They wouldn't have listened to us. Would we have had to fight them? What happens if someone else tries to harm another person?" Bewildered, he asked, "How do we handle this?" The professor went over the most important precepts of servant leadership: listening, empathy, healing, awareness, persuasion, foresight, and building community. He reminds Zahir to think of the way Uncle Louis had handled conflicts. but Amy sensed that her dark-haired friend was not confident those methods would work. "I do have good news for you, especially Zahir," the professor relayed, hoping to bring a little joy back to the young man's troubled gaze. He explained about fathers and mothers and how a family structure works in the big world. With apologetic overtures to Kenzie, he explained in a rather confusing manner that some of the Tanis were based on unknown combinations, but that Zahir and Amy were not. He told them about Amy being his daughter and her relation to Uncle Louis. Wide-eyed, the young man listened to everything he said and tried to absorb the new, highly significant information. "Zahir," he continued kindly, "you have parents in my world who are very dear friends of mine. I've worked closely with them over many years. They know that you are their son, and they have asked to meet you." Awestruck, Zahir didn't know what to say. Amy and Kenzie looked over with excitement. "I'll send you through their phone number," the professor told him. "When you feel up to it, you can give them a call in the same way that you call me." Saying goodbye, the professor sent through the number. "You have parents!" Amy cheered, standing up and clapping her hands together. "This is so exciting, Zahir." Looking over, Zahir said, "And so do you. Why didn't you tell me that the professor was your father?" "I wasn't allowed to tell," she explained. "He doesn't want anyone to feel less important. He wants all of us to be his children. You and Kenzie are just as much a part of his family as anyone else." Kenzie nodded slowly, but he didn't look convinced. Zahir was contemplative, trying to process the new, impactful information. "Should we call them?" Amy asked eagerly. She knew how wonderful it had been to discover her own family relations, and she longed to meet Zahir's parents. She thought it might boost his floundering confidence to speak to the people most closely related to him. She anticipated they would love him a great deal. "I suppose," he replied, "it's rather intimidating." "Intimidating," Kenzie agreed, "but also very exciting. You are so lucky." Amy clicked on the tab to set up a new contact. She wrote in, "Zahir's parents," and looked over at him with a smile. Raising his dark eyebrows cautiously, he smiled back. With her finger hovering over the number, Amy asked, "Do you want me to make the call?" Taking a deep breath, Zahir nodded slowly. Eagerly, Amy pressed the button. In no time at all, the call was answered. A beautiful dark-haired woman with lovely blue eyes appeared on the screen. "Zahir," she gasped in surprise. "You called us! Oh my! Let me just find your father. This is wonderful, so wonderful." They saw her call out to Farouk, telling him that his son was on the phone. In a moment, 2 eager faces appeared on the screen and 3 Tanis looked back. "Hello," Zahir said nervously. "The professor has just told me that you are my mother and father," he began uncomfortably. Watching the parents and son exchange awkward introductions, Amy noticed that Rachel's stunning blue eyes were very similar to Zahir's. Farouk had the same skin coloring and perhaps the same gentle spirit. This was the first family she had ever seen. A husband and wife standing together with a son in paradise who shared characteristics of both of them. It was all so special, and she was fascinated. Having introduced themselves, Zahir's parents asked about his time in the caring center and how he was healing. Amy was thankful when they assured their son that his scarring was perfectly normal for the injuries he had sustained. "In fact," Farouk replied, "I'm surprised how well you've healed, Zahir." Looking at Kenzie and Amy briefly, he flashed a grateful smile. "We saw you when you were first injured," he told his son. "Whoever looked after you has superior nursing abilities." Suddenly, a young face appeared on the screen in front of his parents. He had the same coloring as Zahir, but his big eyes were very dark like his father's. His smile quickly faded into concern as he noticed one of the tiny scars in his cloudy eye. He turned and whispered something in his mother's ear and pointed to the screen. Kenzie put his arm around his friend. "This is your brother Jordan," Rachel introduced warmly. "He's 5 years old." Amy was ecstatic. Zahir had a little brother? Turning to the curious 5-year-old, his mother gently explained, "Your brother Zahir was badly burned trying to save another tiny. Zahir saved Ponzi, who was trapped under a burning beam." "Wow, you're very brave," Jordan smiled with full admiration. "That must have hurt a lot." The dark-haired tiny smiled. "It did," he agreed. "But, thankfully, I had 2 very kind nurses who fixed me up." "Did they only look after you?" With a quick smile in his friend's direction, Zahir turned back to those on the screen. "No, they are kind to everyone. They looked after Ponzi and Uncle Louie, too. They really do have superior nursing abilities." Farouk and Rachel glanced at each other in a loving way. Jordan looked bewildered. "I'm really glad to meet you, Jordan," Zahir smiled. "Me too," Amy piped up. "And me as well," Kenzie added. With a quizzical expression on his face, the boy asked, "Can you all come to my house?" Chuckling, Zahir shook his head. "We would really love to, but we can't right now." "As soon as the Paradise exhibit opens, we will go to see Zahir in his world," Rachel assured her younger son, "and we'll see Amy and Kenzie and all the others," she added. "Where is Paradise?" Jordan asked. "It's where we go to look after all the animals." "But where? I've never seen these people before." Jordan was full of questions, but finally his parents sent him back to bed. "He will absolutely love watching you in Paradise," Rachel laughed. "So you've seen us?" Zahir clarified. "Yes," his mother nodded. She explained, "Your world is right next to where I work in the rainforest biosphere. You can Google the Greenville biosphere online and see what it's like. I am an animal doctor, so I take care of the birds and the animals." Looking over at the young lady beside Kenzie, she said, "Amy, I hear you love animals too. I've watched you care for them. We have so much in common. We'll have to have a chat one day. Often in the mornings before work or after I'm done, I look in to see how everyone is doing. I love watching the go-karting and the surfing shows and just everyday life. Your world is beautiful." The tinies nodded. It was very strange to imagine other people looking in at them. However, Amy understood their curiosity. She was eager to Google the rainforest biome and see what their world looked like. "We saw you stand up to Odin when you wanted to find a way out of Paradise," Farouk spoke up, looking fondly at his son. "We were very impressed by your courage. And yours too, Kenzie," he added. "And Zahir, we know how you took charge in the fire and rushed in to help Ponzi. We're very proud of you." Amy and Kenzie smiled warmly at their brave friend, but he seemed to be uncertain of how to respond. Rachel spoke up, saying that she would like to give her son a new name, a middle name, which was a strange concept to all 3 tinies. He was now to be Zahir Haniel, as a token to her father and his father before him. "It's a Jewish name," she smiled. "Zahir is Arabic, like your father. Haniel is Jewish, like me." "Jewish?" Amy interjected. "We've been reading all about Jewish people in the Bible. Is Zahir a Jew?" Zahir's eyes widened in surprise. With a wild expression, he glanced quickly over at Amy and then back to his parents on the screen. "Technically, yes," Farouk agreed. "Did you say that you've been reading the Bible?" Rachel asked with a slightly concerned tone. Zahir nodded. "It's an amazing book," he stated confidently. "Uncle Louie started reading it to us while we were all confined to the crisis room. We've learned so much." Rachel shared a worried glance with her husband. "Does the professor know about this?" she questioned. "Oh, yes," Amy piped up. "He sent in his own book as well, and we're comparing the 2. "I see," Rachel frowned. "I am surprised. Personally, I wouldn't recommend that." Farouk placed his hand on hers, and Rachel stopped and looked up at him uncertainly. He shook his head. Clearing her throat lightly, Rachel didn't finish her sentence. Instead, she smiled in her son's direction, saying, "Well, we have something special we'd like to offer you, Zahir, you and your friends with their superior nursing abilities." Amy had noted the silent communication on the screen. With amazement, she pondered, Her husband didn't say a word, and yet she understood his message perfectly. Is this part of being one? Rachel was relaying her idea. I don't know if the professor has told you or not, she said, but your father and I are both doctors. Doctors are like nurses, but they know even more. I look after animals, and your father cares for people in hospitals. I suppose you would call them caring centers. We look after the sick and wounded and bring them back to health. We sent in all the medications and creams for your recovery. With surprise, Zahir thanked them gratefully. Thinking of all the pages they had stuck to the walls in the caring center, Amy's face glowed. Were all the instructions from you? She asked. Yes, that was my writing, Rachel nodded, pleased that Amy had asked. The notes were really helpful, and thanks for all the medications, Kenzie added. You're very welcome, Farouk replied. A doctor is truly needed in paradise, Rachel encouraged. You may face other emergencies or illnesses. Having someone with expertise inside the dome could be very useful and save lives. If you are interested, Farouk and I can set you up with a course. You could learn to be a doctor, she smiled at her son, like your father and like me. Stunned, Zahir hesitated. Amy saw the dark look pass over his face. But that's what Kenzie and Amy do, he said slowly. They would both be fantastic doctors. Turning to his friends, he pleaded, I'm sure Kenzie would love to take a course. And you too, Amy? Amy sensed his uneasiness and wished she was sitting close beside the one she loved best. Kenzie reached over and clapped his friend's shoulder. And you, Zahir, he assured him. We'd like to do this with all of you, Rachel replied earnestly, speaking to her son. If you are interested, that is. It would be a great opportunity for us to develop a relationship. Farouk put his arm around his wife's shoulders. Changing the subject, he asked kindly, What do you like to do, Zahir? What are your interests? Well, before the fire happened, I caught fish every morning, Zahir smiled. That was my time to have chats with the guys, and fried fish is the best breakfast. Since the fire, I've been learning about the gospel message and God's Son, Jesus Christ. This has had a powerful effect on my life, especially, he added soberly, with all that I've gone through. I want to search it out more and be certain it's true. If it is, I want to share this hope with everyone. Rachel turned and looked at Farouk uneasily. He has his own life, Zahir's father said quietly to her. He doesn't live in our world. With a loving smile, Rachel suggested, maybe you could do both. It would be really nice if we all had something that we could enjoy together. Perhaps we can talk again soon, Farouk suggested. With proud eyes, he said, Zahir, we are very impressed by the valor you have demonstrated inside paradise. We want to be a part of your life somehow. Give some thought to your mother's suggestion. There's so much we could share with you that will benefit your entire community. Including the others, his father added, Amy and Kenzie, we're very thankful that you followed the directions with such diligence. We can't thank you enough for nursing Zahir and Ponzi through such serious injuries. We know it wasn't easy. Had you not been so dedicated to their care, they may not have healed as well as they did. We are very, very grateful and impressed with your abilities. The conversation ended in a loving way. When the screen went dark, Amy noticed the brooding look on Zahir's face. Having been in close proximity with her favorite patient every day for the last 3 weeks, she was beginning to understand some of his expressions. She longed to hold his hand. She sensed his troubled feelings. Kenzie suggested Googling the rainforest biome. For a while they had fun exploring the world around their world, admiring the animals and plants and massive greenhouse structures so close by. Finally, they understood why the sky was crisscrossed with black lines and realized that high above it was a beautiful, unblemished expanse. They had plenty to share with Kenzie, showing him some of the highlights from the night they had spent with Uncle Louis. But when they finally turned off the phone and locked the cave door behind them, Amy could see that her dark-haired friend was troubled. What's wrong, Zahir? She asked kindly. That was a lot to consider tonight, he mumbled quietly. I need some time to think things over. Your parents seem really nice, Amy encouraged, as they climbed the hill back toward the caring center. And I love your little brother. He is really cute, Zahir agreed flatly. Reaching over, he passed Amy the key out of his pocket. "This isn't so important anymore. You should keep it, since only you can turn on the phone." Amy took it back reluctantly. "How do you like your mom and dad?" Kenzie asked, as they trudged up the rock stairs, keeping a wary eye on the swaying trees. "Or was that all a bit much?" "It was a bit much," he sighed. "They do seem really nice," he replied earnestly. "I'm just not sure we have anything in common." Stopping still, Amy asked, "Why?" "Well, they are doctors," he explained wistfully, standing behind her on one of the large flat stones. "They aren't fishermen. And it doesn't seem like they have a very good impression of the Bible. I'm just not sure that the things that matter most to me are meaningful to them." With a deep sigh, he relayed, "Uncle Louis is the only parent I need. I want to be like him. He appreciates me for who I am, and I appreciate him." "We do too," Amy pleaded, speaking for herself and Kenzie. Tentatively, she reached out for Zahir's hand, but he stepped off the stairway and trudged past her up the hill. "I just need some time to think," he begged, as they reached the clearing and felt the full force of the wind. "I'm sorry, Amy. Please don't be hurt. I'm just not sure I'm the right one for any of this." With a heavy sigh, he said, "Good night." Then he turned around and headed quickly towards the mansion. Amy fought back tears. Kenzie hesitated uncertainly. "I think we should give him some time and space," he mused. "It would be rather overwhelming to meet your actual parents when you didn't know he had any. I know I'd need time to deal with it, if I was so lucky." Nodding dismally, Amy agreed. "You're such a good friend to him, Kenzie. I really appreciate how much you care for Zahir." "He's my best friend," Kenzie stated. "I'm really glad you care for him too." Looking down at the meadow, he said, "I think I'll go visit the farmers, but I'll be back later tonight." He shrugged and said, "Maybe then he'll want to talk." Following his gaze, Amy could see silhouettes on Mining Hill. Hesitating, Kenzie asked, "Are you okay?" With a sad smile, Amy sighed. "We all need time to think." "We do," he agreed. Giving her a quick hug, Kenzie said goodnight and took off down the nearly finished stone stairway. Amy sat down on the hill and looked out over the windy orchard. Trees were swaying in the breeze. Sunflowers looked like they might topple over. Small waves rolled across the lake. Once again, she felt hurt and confused. She knew it was normal for burn victims to feel a whole range of emotions, but she didn't understand why Zahir's doubts and questions were causing him to push her away. Does he just need time and space, she wondered? Or am I doing or saying something wrong? If he loves me, why doesn't he want to be with me? It seems like he'd rather pass me off to Kenzie, but wouldn't that make him jealous if he cares? But Kenzie encourages me to tell Zahir how I feel. And well, I still haven't, she reflected. I'm just not certain he feels the same way anymore, if he ever did. Surely my feelings have been obvious. Or maybe they aren't, she sighed. Is that the problem? Does he actually need to hear a few simple words to believe? Watching her nursemaid run across the meadow and up the slope of Mining Hill, she considered, maybe Zahir wants nothing to do with leading paradise. Maybe he just wants a quiet life without so much responsibility. But my father has chosen me for this role, and Uncle Louis wants me to try my hardest. I don't want to let them down. I have to think of what's best for everyone, not just me. Maybe Zahir isn't the best choice. Maybe I've got it all wrong. Oh, I really need to talk to Uncle Louis about this. Weary and unsure about love, Amy headed home to bed. As she lay quietly in the darkness, she thought about the lovely relationship she'd witnessed on the screen. How beautiful to just understand each other without a word, she marveled. Did Zahir's parents always have that understanding? Or did it happen over time? Did they ever disagree or doubt each other? Were they each other's first choice? Oh, what is it like to be married to someone? Chapter 43. Hope. Squawking lorikeets woke Amy up as the first light of dawn brightened Lily's room. Rising with the morning sun, Amy pulled on her favorite blue dress with the glittering spirals that Dia had made. She noticed a long white dress hanging inside Lily's closet door. Lily has her dress, Amy smiled. Now she and Poncy can get married. I wonder if Nancy has hers. A loud knock sounded on the door, followed by another. Amy, are you up? Kenzie called out desperately. Immediately, Amy sensed the urgency in his voice. She ran to turn the handle. It's Uncle Louis, her friend cried out when she opened the door. His big gray eyes were filled with anguish. Come, please come. Zahir was kneeling at Uncle Louis's side, sobbing. Uncle Louis lay in the bed, completely still. Running over, Amy laid her hand on the older man's chest. He was cold. In a panic, she tried his vital signs. He wasn't breathing. He had no pulse. Should I try CPR? She cried out, attempting to tilt back his head. Uncle Louis was very stiff. She recoiled in fear. Kenzie laid his hand on her shoulder. He's dead, Amy, he said soberly. It's too late. He must have died in the night. Wanting to do something, anything to help, Amy looked for Uncle Louis's oxygen tanks. But they were missing. Tell the professor, Zahir begged between sobs. Ask him what we should do. Do you want me to come with you? Kenzie inquired. Seeing the distress of her dark-haired friend, Amy shook her head. She felt it'd be better for Kenzie to stay with Zahir. Thank you, but I'll be okay, she assured him. Running down to the cave, she burst in through the door. The face recognition worked well, and she tried a video call. Thankfully, the professor answered right away. Uncle Louis died, she blurted out. He's cold. He's stiff. Kenzie told me not to do CPR. Breaking down in sobs, she cried, What do we do? Months ago, such an outcome would have been the professor's worst nightmare. The unsubstantiated, controversial science of cryonics was only effective if performed shortly after death. Months ago, he would have thrown all of paradise into a frenzy, trying to get Louis out as soon as possible, hoping beyond hope that even if he was cold and stiff, an EEG might show a little brain activity. But all his research and study were leading him to realize the miracle of life was far beyond human ingenuity. Nevertheless, he longed to bring Louis to his side, to hold him one last time and bury him himself. Louis was his beloved son. Tears were running down his own face as he gave instructions to Amy. Please bring him to me, he pleaded. I'll send in the train. Please carry Uncle Louis down and put him on it. Amy, my darling, I'm so sorry. I wish I could give you a hug, you and all the tinies. I know this will leave such a deep hole in everyone's hearts. Sobbing, Amy nodded. Yet even through her sadness, little rays of hope were breaking through. Uncle Louis had told her not to try and revive him. He had said he was at peace. He believed something far better was coming, and death was only a part of the transformation. Deep emotions welled up inside her heart. Looking up at her father with a tear-stained face, she blurted out, I don't understand why you're so against God. God gave Uncle Louis hope. Knowing that they were both emotionally distraught, the professor didn't feel it was a good time to engage in a discussion of this nature. Amy, he said kindly, I wrote what I believed at the time. It's quite possible that I've been wrong. And if I'm wrong, I will have huge apologies to make. For now, please just send Louis to me. I will talk this over with you when both of us aren't so upset. With a grateful, sad smile, Amy nodded, realizing the professor was grieving just like she was. Okay, I'm sorry, Dad, she apologized earnestly. I'll go tell the others. The train whistle sounded as Amy reached the carrying center on Rainbow Hill. Together, Kenzie, Zahir, and Amy lovingly laid Uncle Louis on the stretcher and brought him down to the tracks. Everyone had gathered for breakfast and was there to witness the tragic departure. There were many tears. A brown envelope lay in the train car with the names of the 3 leaders. Picking it up, Zahir handed it to Kenzie for safekeeping. Watching the train head back through the tunnel with Uncle Louis on board was devastating to all the tinies. Some expressed hope that maybe he'd be back again in a few days. After all, that was what had happened the last time. Others wondered how life would go on without him. Many were weeping and hugging each other. The orchard girls stood in a tight circle. The farmers had their arms around each other. Santa and Lemur were hugging Ponzi and Lily. Kenzie and Zahir stood together, silently reading the letter. The sound of the train alarms blaring only added to the chaos that everyone was feeling. Leaning against the post of the store veranda, Amy burst into tears when the entrance gate closed and the loud noises were silenced. Her most important and reliable source of comfort, advice, and affection was no longer in paradise. He could no longer answer all the questions she had. Looking over at her friends, she saw Zahir walking away. His head was down, his shoulders slumped. He wasn't sharing his grief with anyone. Disheartened, she didn't understand why he was leaving. Her dark-haired friend looked back for one quick moment, and then he continued on his way. Feeling abandoned, Amy wasn't sure she could bear the sorrow she felt. With her face in her hands, she sobbed deeply. But then, someone placed a hand on her shoulder. Zahir told me to give you a hug, Kenzie murmured compassionately. I'm so sorry, Amy. Amy appreciated the hug. It was a friendly, caring hug, even if it wasn't a Zahir hug. Feeling the loss of Uncle Louis, who had always been there for her, and crushed by Zahir's repeated desertion, Amy was grateful that someone cared. She cried, and Kenzie didn't leave. He even passed her a spare cloth that he kept in his pocket so she could wipe her face and nose. Amy knew that Uncle Louis would not come back to paradise. The last few weeks he had struggled to hold on to life. He had reached the end, and she was now fully aware there was nothing more the professor could do. As she cried over her beloved brother, his words kept echoing inside, round and round in her mind, in a strangely comforting way. Now I can go in peace. I have found the greatest treasure. At last, when the tears had run out and she was able to pull herself together, she thanked Kenzie gratefully. But then, in a pitiful voice, she asked, why didn't Zahir want to hug me? Why does he want to be alone? I don't understand him at all. Kenzie shook his curly brown head and smiled sadly. His own face was wet from crying. He tried to explain. Something is really bothering him, and I kind of understand his point of view, but I don't agree with his conclusions. He smiled. The two of you need to sort this out. You need to have a long talk with Zahir. Standing up straight and wiping her face one more time, she considered his advice. She was confident that Kenzie knew his friend well. She remembered a time when Uncle Louis had told her, we don't always know what is bothering people, but if we're a good friend, we ask them and find out. For months, it had been difficult to talk to Zahir privately, but it wasn't any longer. It was time to overcome fear of rejection. Before she could make any big decisions, she needed to understand what lay behind her friend's confusing actions. I will talk to him, she said with determination. As soon as he comes back, I will talk to him today. Kenzie nodded. I hope you do, he said. Lily came running over with a tragic expression. We still haven't found Odin and Franz, she cried. Did you tell the professor? I sure hope Damien didn't drown them, she wailed. Everyone is dying. Amy put a hand on her roommate's shoulder. They aren't dead, she assured her. Then where are they? She mourned. Kenzie looked around and saw that many of the others were looking over. Some had heard Lily's complaints and were heading his way. He waited until most of the group was within hearing distance, and then he called out, We have news about Odin and Franz. Everyone came close. As you all know, Kenzie explained, there is a cave in paradise where Uncle Louis and the professor used to meet. He launched into a full explanation of what a phone was and all the ways in which it could connect with the outside world. He told them that Odin and Franz had dug a tunnel to access this device and used it to gain harmful information and ideas. This was the professor's fear from the very beginning, he stated, that instead of seeking helpful things from this device, we would indulge ourselves in the bad. Many questions were asked about the phone in the cave, and Kenzie and Amy did their best to answer. Damien protested that it was extremely unfair that some knew about it and others did not. Amy assured them all that this was going to change in the future, but with some limitations. What are the limits? Lima wanted to know. Amy has to be there with you, Kenzie explained. The phone will only turn on if it sees her face. What? Lily retorted. That's not true. I can turn it on myself. Not anymore, Kenzie replied. Hands on her hips, Georgia challenged. And why, Amy? Kenzie pulled out a letter from the brown envelope he had found on the train. This is from the professor, he told everyone. Vinitha came close to view the letter. Amy looked up, waiting to hear what it was about. I'll read it to you all, Kenzie said. There was complete silence as he unfolded the piece of paper and cleared his throat. To all my beloved family, it began. I know today is a very sad day for you all. Losing Uncle Louis will leave a big hole in your lives and hearts. His guidance, support, and love has been wonderful and in many ways is irreplaceable. I'm grieving today just as you are. Uncle Louis was very special to me. In order to maintain communication between myself and Paradise, I have given this responsibility to Amy, Zahir, and Kenzie. From this day forward, I am choosing them to contact me when supplies are needed, problems arise, or decisions need to be made. However, tomorrow morning after breakfast, I'd like to meet all of you in the cave and talk to you over the phone. We have many things to discuss. With love from your father, the professor. For a few moments, the invitation caused a major stir of excitement. It was good news at a very sad time. Kenzie and Amy answered many questions, and then Damien remembered the first question that had still not been answered. So, where are Odin and Franz? He challenged. You said you had news about them. Without giving too much detail, Kenzie explained that the professor had heard the two Tinies plot another catastrophe, worse than the first two, based on things they'd seen on the internet. He told them that the two schemers had been banished to the nursery. Of course, everyone wanted to know how they had been banished, and Kenzie told them they had chosen to walk out through the open train entrance. Once all the questions had been asked and everyone felt somewhat satisfied with the answers, they began to head back to their homes. I'm going to clean up the caring center, Amy said to her curly-haired friend. I can't bear to walk past Uncle Louis's bed tonight and know that he's gone. Shrugging his shoulders, Kenzie replied, I'll help you. It's a big job. I think Zahir plans to go home tonight, and Ponce has already gone back to his cabin. You can finally have your room back. Vinitha looked up at the curly-haired nurse with a shy, hopeful expression. I promised Vahid I'd help him dye the wool today. He's waiting for me. But will you be at the hill tonight? She asked. With a smile, Kenzie nodded. I'll be there, he promised. See you then. Nodding warmly, Vinitha headed off to the farmland. Observing the friendly interactions, Amy was pleased. This is nice, she thought. She wanted Kenzie to have someone special in his life. Together, the two nurses walked back up to the caring center to clean up. There were some tearful moments when they first walked into the room and saw all 3 beds lying empty. In between many tears and fond reflections, they sorted through the supplies. Bandages and gauze were no longer needed in the room, and most of the medication had been consumed. For a while they worked steadily, carting used bottles to the store deck to put on the train. Dia joined in to wash and sort the blankets. Charlie was summoned to help Kenzie pile the mattresses downstairs in the house. Beds were moved around and organized so that everyone could have their own room again. Where should we put the Bible? Kenzie asked Amy, as they stood in the newly uncluttered room looking at the window seat. I think it should be somewhere accessible to everyone. Deciding they should take it down to the living room area, Amy walked over to where it lay. She stooped down to look at the pages. The Bible was open to 1 Corinthians 15. Glancing down, the copper-haired nurse saw the word resurrection. Look at this, she said. Kenzie joined her. Scanning the words quickly, she cried out in astonishment. This whole chapter is about resurrection. Tears began running down her face. Let's take it downstairs, Kenzie encouraged. We can read it out loud, and maybe others will hear and join us. Picking up the heavy book between them, they took it downstairs and placed it carefully on the large table that was never used for eating, and surrounded by several chairs. With a wide wall of windows, the kitchen was always brightly lit in the daytime. Maybe we could bring the solar lights in here, Kenzie suggested. Then we can have an investigation every evening after go-karting for anyone who wants to come. At that moment, Santa and Lima walked in. Seeing the Bible open on the living room table, Santa's eyes lit up. Curiously, she asked, "Is this the book that we're not supposed to know anything about?" Then she giggled. Amy and Kenzie nodded. With his arms across his chest, Lima laughed. "Is it down here because we're finally allowed to be part of this investigation?" he challenged. "Yes. It's time to share it with everyone," Amy relayed, explaining the reason for keeping it a secret. "Oh, we know all too well," Santa replied with a happy sway. "We've been listening in right from the start, and we want to hear more." Kenzie was pleased. He told them about the Bible being left open to 1 Corinthians 15 and that he and Amy wanted to read the chapter through. Sitting down on the white furry rug, the four tinies read it together, commenting from time to time with the occasional flood of tears. Lima finished the encouraging words, reading, "For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we shall be changed. For this perishable body must put on the imperishable, and this mortal body must put on immortality. When the perishable puts on the imperishable, and the mortal puts on immortality, then shall come to pass the saying that is written, 'Death is swallowed up in victory.'" Feeling great encouragement, Amy piped up, "This is the reason Uncle Louis died so peacefully. God is going to overcome death, the great enemy. Mortal bodies will be made immortal." Santa exclaimed, "I love this hope. God can give Uncle Louis and all of us life again. We need to share this with everyone." The others agreed happily. Lima noticed a reference written in the margin. When he asked what it meant, Kenzie said, "Let's look it up." Showing the others the book title tabs, Kenzie helped Lima find Revelation chapter 21, verse 3. Resting against her dark friend's arm, Santa read, "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away. The one who conquers will have this heritage, and I will be his God, and he will be my son." "Oh, this is wonderful!" Santa rejoiced, getting up and dancing around. "We can all be part of God's family. No more tears, no more death." Nodding his head, Kenzie pondered thoughtfully. "I suppose when we're made immortal, all the things that cause tears and pain will be gone. This is the future that God has promised forever." There was another handwritten reference, so Lima turned up 1 Thessalonians 4, verses 13 to 17. They read it through with interest, and Amy summarized, "We aren't to grieve as others who have no hope. Uncle Louis is just asleep, waiting for Jesus to return and raise the dead. We will see him again. And the living and the dead will be gathered together to be with Christ at his return." Kenzie smiled, wiping his eyes. "What a day that will be." "Amy," Santa spoke up suddenly, clapping her hands together, "I know what we need to do. We need to get everyone together tomorrow and have a special remembrance for Uncle Louis. We can read this chapter to everyone and tell them that this was Uncle Louis's hope." The others nodded eagerly. "Great idea, Santa," Kenzie agreed. "I'm sure Uncle Louis would have made the same suggestion if he were here." "And we can sing songs about him," Lima nodded. "Yes, songs. We should all do songs," Amy smiled, "and share stories of our favorite times with him." Santa's eyes sparkled. "And the things he said that we need to remember," she added. "I really like this idea," Kenzie enthused. "Maybe Vanitha and even Georgia could make a beautiful sign in his memory." "And we should have food," Santa reflected, "like all of Uncle Louis's favorites. Fried fish, fruit salad, maybe even honey buns." Amy smiled sadly as tears welled up in her eyes. "But just one for everybody," she teased. The others chuckled. "Let's go and see who wants to be involved," Santa said, standing up. "We'll go talk to Nancy and Charlie about the food." "I'll find Vanitha," Kenzie said quietly. They all walked to the door. Outside on the deck, Amy hesitated. "I'm going to try and find Zahir," she said resolutely. If any of you see him, she begged, looking around at her friends, please tell him that I want to talk to him. Santa and Lima nodded and rushed off to organize the meal. Kenzie hung back with encouragement. Be brave, Amy, he said. Just keep talking till Zahir has a smile on his face. Looking up appreciatively, she promised, I will. As her steady, helpful friend with the kind gray eyes turned to leave, she called out suddenly, Kenzie, just one more thing. Raising one eyebrow in a quizzical fashion, he stopped. Thank you, she said sincerely. You've been a true friend to Zahir and to me. With a laugh, she added, I hope we don't have any more emergencies, but if we do, I will gladly work with you again. Reaching out to playfully shake her hand, Kenzie agreed. Me too, Nurse Amy. It's been my pleasure. Chapter 44. Finding Peace. As the nurses parted ways and Amy left the caring center that was now restored to a home, she wondered where Zahir might be. There were a few possibilities, such as his house, or down by the water, or possibly somewhere in the large forest on Rainbow Hill. She was fairly certain that he wanted to be alone, or at least that he thought he did. She understood that sometimes being alone was the best way to sort through troubled emotions. But she also remembered the saddest moment of her life, when she thought she wanted isolation and was surprised to discover a kind friend could turn darkness to light. She hoped it might be her turn to rescue him. As the laughter echoed from Rose's Hill, Amy went first to Zahir's house in the forest, but no one answered the door. She tried calling his name, standing on the hill, but no one replied. Making her way down the winding path to the beach, a small object caught her eye. Someone was out in a boat on the lake. A red boat. A boat that she had once named the Red Bird. Of course, she smiled. He's gone fishing. Walking down to the pier, she knew eventually the boat would come into dock. Until then, she decided to wait. Sitting down on the pier, Amy dangled her bare legs in the cool, flowing water. A gentle breeze blew steadily across the lake. After all the sadness of the day, it was refreshing to have some peaceful, quiet moments. She thanked God for the 19 wonderful months of Uncle Louis and that he had helped them find a hope for life far beyond 6 years in paradise. Forever was just the perfect amount. She thanked God that the burn victims had healed so well and that she hadn't made any disastrous mistakes. Then she prayed for the courage to say the right things to Zahir and sort out all their misunderstandings. A calming, tranquil hour went by as she watched the red boat head further and further away. Loons bobbed up and down in the water and occasionally disappeared below the surface. For a wonderful moment, 5 lorikeets landed on the Beach Boys' boat and looked up at her curiously. She stretched out her hand, but none of them were brave enough to come so close. With a few squawks, they rose back up into the air. At one point, she was sure she saw a bat swoop over the water. Bats were rarely seen. As the sun dropped low in the sky and the dinner bell rang out, Amy didn't move. She took the time to reflect on her precious memories with Uncle Louis, trying to decide what she would share with the others. She was sitting close to the place where he had comforted her after she had nearly drowned. Watching the distant red bird move slowly along the perimeter of the dome, she remembered various things her beloved brother had told her, little sayings that she would always keep in her heart. He had led them to Jesus, his new role model, and the one who would never leave them alone. For a few minutes she wondered what Jesus would tell her if he was there by her side. She imagined he might have the same kind expression that often shone from Uncle Louis. In a peaceful reverie, she hoped he might say, "Amy, I love your compassion for others and your desire to do what is right and save lives. It is through these qualities that you can best share my message to the world." Then with a prick of conscience, she wondered if he might add soberly, "And I know that you struggle to love Georgia, and that's something you need to work on, but I'm pleased that you want to try. I'm willing to help you if you take my advice from God's book. It's all there to help you live well and treat others right." As she reflected dreamily upon such comforting and guiding thoughts, gradually the sun began to set and bright colors intensified in the clouds above. The group of lorikeets flew overhead again, squawking noisily. Even a few bluebirds could be seen circling the pier. A fish jumped out of the sparkling pink and gold water. The loons glided by, eyeing her warily and then diving deep and out of sight. In a few minutes she heard them call out far away. The red bird was slowly drawing closer, gliding in on the current. She thought back on her friendship with Zahir. "We both struggle with doubt," her dark-haired friend had once said. She remembered her fears of driving after the accident and thought about the way he had patiently helped her to overcome her anxiety. His full confidence in her ability, his gentle determination to wait for her to try, and his loving smile had put all her fears to rest. Somehow she had to try to do the same for him. She hoped that Zahir wanted a caring friend in his life. Suddenly on the breeze she heard faint singing. The voice she loved best in paradise was singing a new song. Enthralled, she strained forward to listen carefully. Her heart thrilled with the hopeful melody.
"I have found life, I have found faith, I have found God and Jesus Christ, my Lord. I'm never alone, not anymore."
Amy swallowed hard. Uncle Louis had said, "You're not alone, not anymore." Zahir was already composing the perfect song for the remembrance ceremony. She was eager to hear what followed. Her friend was still quite a distance away.
"I have found love, I have found care, I have found hope of loved ones raised again. I'm never alone, not anymore. I found a real father, the one true creator. He always sees me, he knows when I fall. I'm never alone, not anymore. I will see Jesus, he's coming back soon. He gave his life for the world, enduring the pain. I'm never alone, not anymore. So when tears run down my face and my heart wants to break, I'll sing my song joyfully, looking ahead for the day still to come, the day of God's kingdom.
Having picked up on the tune, Amy joined in on the chorus.
I'm never alone, not anymore. I'm never alone, not anymore. I'm never alone, not anymore.
Zahir stopped singing abruptly, as though he had just realized exactly who was sitting on the pier. As the red bird floated closer without any oars, Amy tried to determine the expression on his face, but it was getting dark. It was hard to see. Gazing happily across the water at the young man in the boat, Amy yearned to be his helper. While the one she loved best was still being tossed around by unreliable emotions, he had embraced an unmovable rock. Zahir's trust was in God, and so was hers. They were both discovering the way to find true peace. She hoped they could find it together. Chapter 45. The Best Son. Deep remorse lined Farouk's dark-skinned face. Quietly he confirmed, "I'd say he's been dead for at least 8 hours. I'm sorry, Jax. I'm very sorry for your loss. I'm amazed that Louis lived as long as he did. His heart was quite weak when we sent him back in." Stooped in a chair with his head in his hands, the professor nodded with a dismal expression. Evan wiped his face and blew his nose. I must get back to the hospital," Dr. Khalid said, his dark brown eyes filled with sadness. "I'm sorry, Jax. I wish there was something more that I could do." "I'm very thankful that you asked to come, Farouk," the professor mumbled gratefully. He stood up and shook the doctor's hand. "I really appreciate your involvement with this project. It means so much to both of us." Evan nodded and also shook hands with the doctor. "Thank you so much for rushing over here," he replied appreciatively. "I know it was difficult for you to get away." "And I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to Zahir the other day," Dr. Khalid smiled. "He's a very special young man. I am fully invested in this project. Call me whenever you need me." Once the doctor had left the laboratory, Evan sat down beside the professor. He put his hand on the older man's shoulders. Looking up through his tears, the professor acknowledged Evan. For a while, they sat together in silence. Occasionally, Evan glanced over at the tiny, lifeless body on the emergency bed. Louis was still hooked up to wires and machines, but there were no signs of life. He patted the professor's shoulders and passed him tissues. He didn't know what to say. Finally, the professor spoke. "I knew this day was coming," he murmured. "I just hoped it wouldn't come yet." "It's not something you can ever be prepared for," Evan agreed, wishing he could think of something more comforting to say. Minutes passed by while the scientists mourned the loss of the lifeless Tiny in the emergency bed. "He was a good man," Evan murmured finally. "No," he clarified, "Louis was the best. He gave his life for the Tinies. He always did whatever you wanted him to. He rarely argued or complained, and when he did, he had a good reason to do so. He asked for very few favors. He was just completely dedicated to raising your family. He was a true servant leader." For a long time, the professor didn't respond. Then in a quiet voice, he said, "He was the son I always longed to have. He just didn't live nearly long enough." Standing up, the professor walked over to the small bed. Slowly and carefully, he picked up the body and cradled Louis in his hand. "You were the best son," he wept. "We had 5.5 wonderful years together." Weeping, the professor held his aged son close. Eventually, he reminisced with Evan about the fire and how Louis had overextended himself to help Zahir lift the heavy catapult from Ponzi's back. "You gave yourself to save paradise," Jack sobbed. "And all I could give you was 66 months of life. You deserve so much more." As Evan sat listening to the outpourings of grief, the many discussions he'd had with Seth came into his mind. Over and over, he considered the things he had learned and deliberated whether or not there was a gentle way to share it. He didn't want to add to the professor's misery, but the finality of death accentuated the injustice of keeping the offer of salvation from any of the Tinies. Yes, Louis did deserve more, he thought silently to himself. I'm so thankful that he made the decision to investigate his options and find hope. For most of his life, his worldview was decided for him by those who thought they knew what was best. But we were wrong. Finally, Evan could stay silent no longer. He walked over to the professor and put his arm around the older man's shoulders. "I want you to hear me out," he said gently. "I want you to think about what I say for the sake of all the Tinies who are still left in paradise." The professor looked up at him sadly. "Go ahead," he said. Say what you need to say. You didn't ask your son to save paradise, Evan began. You didn't even want him to risk his life in the fire. You asked him to lead, and he led the best way that he could. But he also chose to do everything in his power to save lives when it was necessary and to stop unexpected catastrophes. He did more than you asked, with a very willing heart. You were proud that he put others first and had such courage. You raised a wonderful son, and for that, you can be very happy. Louis fully enjoyed his life as the uncle to 20 children. Nodding sadly, the professor agreed. Evan swallowed hard. But think about this, he added, with his arms still around Jack's shoulders. God did ask his son to save the world. And he let his son know ahead of time that such a sacrifice would be a very painful, terrible experience. He didn't hide anything from him. He made him fully aware of the cost. The professor nodded. But how can a loving father ask such a thing? He murmured. I think this is what you are missing, Evan told him earnestly. God's son willingly chose to go through with that sacrifice, even though he knew full well what it entailed. He loved the world so much that he wanted to do his part to die a sinless man. God didn't force Jesus to go through with the crucifixion. Jesus said he could have called on thousands of angels to stop his arrest if he wanted to. And God didn't force anyone to mistreat his son. The hatred and torture that Jesus received was a result of his decision to speak up and expose lies that proud men didn't want exposed. His divine healing power provoked envy in some rather than gratitude. God foresaw that this would be the reaction from many, because those who love evil hate good. It's always been that way, right from the beginning. The professor was nodding slowly. And when it was all over, Evan said softly, God brought his son back from the dead. Hanging his head sadly, the professor saw the point, but Evan intended to finish with a positive message. In a gentle voice, he continued, God resurrected his son, and he gave Jesus his divine nature for eternity. Jesus will never feel pain or suffering or death ever again. God took Jesus to be with him in heaven for the last 2,000 years, and he's promised to send him back to rule the whole world for a millennium. God rewarded his son in an incredible way. How can we ever say that our Creator is unfair? Jack's Lemans couldn't speak. Carefully, he laid Louis back down on the incubator bed, and then he broke down weeping. Evan stepped forward and gave the professor an awkward hug. Seemed like the right thing to do. When Jax could speak, he admitted, Save Ray. I can never reward any of the Tinies in such a remarkable way, regardless of what they deserve. 6 years is a pittance. It's true. We aren't God, and I'm so thankful we're not. And you know, Jax, Evan added kindly, we aren't the only ones who feel pain in this relationship with our Father in heaven. What do you mean? Well, this is what I've learned from Seth, Evan explained, moving away and pacing the floor. Sometimes we only see our sufferings. We expect God to be hard and resilient and not to have any emotions. Yet he has told us that he is grieved when he looks down from heaven and sees a world that doubts his words, despises his promises, and rebels against the commands that were only made for our benefit. Looking over at the professor, Evan sighed. After these last 19 months, we both know how that feels. Imagine when God looks at his marvelous creation today and sees so many of us dismiss his incredible handiwork as random chance happenings with no purpose, love, or intelligent thought. Or they tinker and re-engineer his designs like we did. God called Jesus his beloved son and says it was because he loved the world so much that he allowed his son to fall into the hands of abusive sinners who didn't deserve to be saved, with the purpose of saving them. Jax nodded solemnly, feeling very unworthy of such love. Standing in front of the older man, Evan put his hand on his shoulder. You know how difficult it was for you to watch Louis walk into that fire. You would likely have preferred to give yourself rather than see your beloved son hurt by those he tried to save. Do we stop and think how deep God's love is? Do we appreciate the hurt he feels when we don't return his love? I'm not sure I understand, the professor said sincerely. Meeting the professor's curious gaze, Evan realized he had said a lot already. But lately his talks with Seth had helped him reach some important conclusions that he yearned to share with the man who was his mentor, his friend, and someone he loved like a dad. This enormous experiment has given me a new appreciation for how God views our world, Evan told him earnestly. I no longer want to be like Franz or Odin, grumbling, complaining, and unthankful. I recognize the magnificent effort God put into designing the perfect world for us. I now appreciate the joy our Creator must feel when even one of his children demonstrates they trust him or takes the time to turn and thank him for all that he has done. And after these last 19 months, I fully empathize with God's disappointment when he looks down from heaven to see his children consuming all his good gifts without any acknowledgement to the giver of those gifts. Pacing the floor, Evan proclaimed, If I'm going to commit to him, Jax, I'll be all in. Why should any of us expect our Creator to be satisfied with half-hearted relationships, meaningless words, or actions that stem from pretense? I wouldn't want that in a close relationship, would you? God gave us free will so that his love for us can be returned in a satisfying way, in a real, willing relationship, the kind of loving relationship that we all long for. For a moment, the two stood looking at each other and pondering all the things that had been said. Reaching out to steady himself against the wall, the professor was deeply moved by Evan's passionate appeal. Franz? He repeated silently and fearfully to himself. Saddle-lores. Does God look down from heaven and see me as I see those two young men? He pondered the matter inwardly. I haven't acknowledged God as my Creator. I've turned people against him. I've blamed him for my suffering, even as I've benefited from living in his amazing world. But I don't thank him for anything. Am I like Franz and Odin? Jax blurted out. Is Franz like me? Swallowing hard, he trembled from head to foot. The professor had always identified himself with Louis, but now he had to reconsider. Why would God even want me? He asked his friend. Evan paused. Gently, he prodded. How would you feel if Odin or Franz earnestly begged for your forgiveness? Would you want them? Would you accept them back? It wasn't hard to answer that question. I'd be overjoyed, Jax nodded sincerely. As the remains of the dark veil of bitterness fell from his eyes, the professor took a few steps forward and embraced his assistant. Evan, he said, you are so much more than just my assistant. You have been like a son, a wonderful son. I've been wrong. I've been so wrong all these years. God is gracious. He is more gracious than I am. Help me, Evan. Please help me to change. We have been through a lot together, Evan acknowledged compassionately, patting his mentor on the back. I'm with you, Jax, all the way. Together, we'll make a change. We have so much to share with the world. For a moment, the scientists embraced warmly, thankful to be back in harmony once again, with the same purpose and direction for all of the tinies in their care. And just so you know, Evan smiled as they drew back, Louis committed his life to his Heavenly Father just before he died. That 3 weeks he had with the Bible gave him time to sort things out and find the hope. He did? Jax exclaimed. When? How? Before Evan left that evening, he told the professor the whole story. He was thankful he had been there to witness the special event and take 5 precious pictures that he now could share. Chapter 46. Carrycarts of Pain. Darkness had fallen when the red bird glided close to dock. There were no oars in Zahir's hands, and he didn't meet Amy's eyes. Reaching out to the pier, he tried to bring his boat up against the wood in a gentle fashion. "Please may I sing that new song with you?" Amy begged wistfully. "I love it. Uncle Louis would have loved it." Of course," he nodded uncertainly, as the boat bumped up against the wooden structure. Tying it up to the pier, he then spoke with quiet confidence. "I'd really like to investigate the battle more thoroughly, just like Uncle Louis did. Just like he said, I feel like this is the greatest treasure we could find." Amy stood up. "And so do I. Kenzie, Santa, and Lima do as well." "That's great to hear," he said. "Maybe we could all talk to Evan and his friend Seth about this," Amy suggested. "They know a lot about the Bible. I've talked to them before." Looking interested, Zahir nodded. "We should," he agreed. "That might be helpful." Beginning to walk away, the dark-haired man stopped when Amy didn't follow. "Are you staying here?" he questioned. Amy swallowed hard. "I've been waiting to talk to you," she confessed. With a quizzical expression, he asked, "Is everything okay?" There was a lot Amy could have told him about their plans for remembering Uncle Louis the next day, but she knew it was finally the right time and place for a difficult conversation. Forcing herself to begin, she said, "Zahir, something isn't okay. Something between us. Please tell me what's bothering you." The scarred man didn't look up, but he spoke firmly. "There's nothing bothering me," he said, avoiding her gaze. "The professor, your father, told us that we needed to think about what is best for paradise, not necessarily for ourselves. I thought about a lot of things last night," he relayed, shifting uncomfortably on the pier. "I really hoped to talk it over with Uncle Louis." His voice wavered. "But I was too late." He wiped his eyes. "I know God loves us all, but we each have different roles. I really don't think I'm the right one to help you or the professor." "Zahir?" Pointing to his face, he explained rather bitterly, "How can I help you leave paradise when I look like this? And what if I go completely blind? What if I become a burden to everyone?" A tear ran down his cheek and he shrugged helplessly. "Oh, great. I'm crying again. This is so embarrassing," he murmured. "Look, I'm still not myself. I don't even understand who I am anymore. You're better off to lead with, well, Kenzie than with me. Damien wasn't right for you. He wouldn't treat you well, but Kenzie will be amazing. He will help you communicate with the professor and make all the important decisions. You can both learn from my parents and be great doctors together." Amy tried to protest, but Zahir stepped back with his hands up. "Don't worry about me," he said almost harshly as his words tumbled out. "I'll be fine. I have God and Jesus Christ in my life now. I'm not alone. I have all that I need. I'll keep fishing and investigating the Bible and, well, I'll help out wherever I can." The unexpected reply caught her off guard. Old doubts came sweeping back in one enormous wave. "Zahir will be fine without me?" she pondered. "Really? Do I matter so little to him? Is God all that he needs? Why is he always pushing me away? Is Kenzie wrong about this?" Amy longed for a comforting hug from Uncle Louis. Inside, she tried to stay balanced. "But God says it's not good for a man to be alone," she recalled. "That's why he made Eve. Trust what Kenzie said. Tell him how you feel. Don't take it personally. Don't fizzle out before you've given this your very best try. He doesn't have a smile on his face. You can't leave yet." "Why?" she faltered sadly. "I don't understand." In a kinder tone, Zahir explained, "You deserve more, Amy. Kenzie's a good-looking guy who cares about you. You both work so well together. You'll be a fabulous doctor. What more can you want?" "Zahir," she pleaded, "I want to be with you. I love you." Flinching uneasily, the scarred man swallowed hard and folded his arms across his chest. "Amy, you don't have to look after me anymore. I don't want you to feel sorry for me or think I need a friend. That's too painful. A smile broke out on her face as Amy felt certain what lay behind all his objections. Is that what you think this is about? She asked incredulously. I don't feel sorry for you, Zahir. I love you. But that doesn't make sense. What do you mean? Darkly, he relayed, all my life I've been trying to get your attention, and you've always been looking the other way. Why would you suddenly be interested now that I'm an ugly wreck? Astonished, she asked, when have you tried to get my attention and not received it? As though he was surprised that she didn't know, he frowned. Over and over when we were kids, you were always more interested in the surfers. But there was one night, about a month ago, when I thought maybe you did care, he relayed bitterly. But when I finally found the courage to tell you that I loved you, you didn't even reply. You said nothing. You looked scared. If you loved me, Amy, why didn't you say so then? But that was the night you turned my darkness into light, she exclaimed, astounded, suddenly realizing that silence might sometimes be as painful as hurtful words. Was this the brutal experience he had talked to Uncle Louis about? Had she caused more pain than Georgia? Stunned, she tried to apologize. I can't believe you went home feeling that I didn't care. I am so sorry. Tears began to flow on the anxious face across from hers, and Zahir hastily wiped them away. Amy tried to explain. Zahir, there was a rule, remember? That dumb girls' rule? Georgia claimed you. So I was breaking the rules that night. I wasn't supposed to hug you, or spend time alone with you, or say I loved you. That's why I looked scared. Even when Uncle Louis got rid of the rule, I still didn't feel it was right to interfere. He told me that Jesus said we should treat others the way we want to be treated. And you were telling Georgia that you loved her every day, so I doubted you meant what you said to me. Her voice faltered. This has all been breaking my heart too, you know. Zahir wiped his eyes again as a bright smile shimmered through. Really? He questioned, trying to process all this new information. That's all there was to it? You were just afraid of breaking a silly rule? Yes, really, she smiled. That sad song had a lot to do with you. Astonished, the scarred man relented. With a happy chuckle, he reached out and pulled her close. It was a true Zahir hug, warm and comforting. While the stars shone through the night sky and fireflies flitted around the breeze, Amy savored the best hug in her world, the one she'd been waiting for. She was deeply thankful that she had finally discovered what was troubling her very best friend. After a little while, Zahir said, It might have saved some confusion if you'd told me how you felt earlier, but I appreciate your integrity. No, actually, I admire your integrity. You did the right thing, Amy. I've been just trying to live by the no hurting rule. I didn't think about all those other restrictions. A lopsided smile crept across his face, and he added, You didn't write those on your board. Recalling her attempt to qualify the rules, Amy laughed. No, it was a secret rule, she relayed, until it wasn't anymore. You are definitely someone I trust, he smiled. But then, I guess I haven't been fair to you, he apologized. I'm sorry, Amy. What do you mean? Zahir explained his side of the story. He had been devastated when he had been told that she only cared for him as a friend. He had realized that she loved Damien much more than him. Georgia had showered him with attention and helped mend his broken heart. But lately, he confessed, I found myself speaking meaningless words to someone who was not my first choice, but I thought I cared enough about to make it work. He sighed, Amy, if I had realized that I was hurting you, I would have ended that relationship right away, even though it would have hurt Georgia. In anguish, Zahir added, It's really hard to get all this sorted and not hurt anyone. It is, she agreed. And misunderstandings are so painful when you love someone this much. Zahir begged, Amy, why do you love me? Thankful to finally have the freedom to speak without any others looking on or previous claims to consider, the copper-haired girl looked up earnestly. It was time to ride the wave. I can't fully explain why your smiling face makes me so happy. My face? My ugly face? But you cried when you saw the pink. So here, Amy implored, I cried for your feelings because I knew it would matter to you. There's no other face I'd rather see. He was shaking his head, but she smiled, happy to remind her friend who he truly was. That's not all there is to it, she began. I love your honesty, Zahir. Your incredible music and all your emotions, even your tears. She laughed kindly as they began pouring down. Smiling, Zahir shrugged helplessly. This time he didn't bother to brush them away. She reached up and did it for him. You want to be like Uncle Louis, and now Jesus, she continued, and so do I. You risked your life to save Ponzi. I only wish I were brave enough to do what you did. You care about right and wrong, and so do I. You knew how to change my sad song into hope, and I love your songs. I want to sing them all with you. You care about other people's feelings, even people that don't deserve you. And well, she shrugged happily, you give the very best hugs in paradise, the only hugs I need. Enveloping her in another one of those wonderful hugs, Zahir lamented, wish we had talked earlier, like much earlier. We could have saved each other so much heartbreak. Snuggled in her best friend's arms, Amy cheerfully disagreed. Without the pain, it wouldn't be so good now. What are you saying? With her head on his shoulder, she explained to Zahir, I'm so sorry for all the hurt I caused you, but all this has helped me to realize just how special you are. I appreciate you more because of the pain. Zahir quietly pondered her words. Okay, but let's be done with hurting each other or anyone else, he begged. From here on, it's you and only you for me. Earnestly, he pleaded, if I give you my heart, Amy, I won't be able to share you with Damien or Kenzie or anyone else, not in this way. On top of everything else, jealousy has been driving me crazy. A big smile spread across Amy's face. It was a relief to hear that the one she loved was jealous of her affections. It was a satisfying confirmation that he truly had deep feelings for her. With a happy laugh, she teased, well, then it's a good thing I didn't let you pass me over to someone else. I know, he agreed, chuckling sadly as he pulled her closer. I'm sorry for how I've been acting, Amy. I would have understood if you had chosen Kenzie, and I really thought that's what you wanted. I just need to be sure that you'll be happy with me, for my sake and for yours. You are the one I love, Zahir, she promised earnestly. You'll marry me? He challenged. Zahir, I need you by my side. I want to marry you, she exclaimed. Among the twinkling fireflies and the distant call of the loons, two very happy tinies enjoyed their budding new relationship. This time, I wasn't a whoosh, Amy sighed inwardly, feeling very happy and content. And finally, we understand each other. Looking over at their boat nearby, Zahir asked, do you want to go for a ride in the water? Sure, she replied joyfully. How long has it been since we rowed together? Way too long. Out in the gently rolling water, it took Amy a few tries to remember how to steer the boat in a straight fashion against the current. But once they were back in sync, Zahir encouraged her to head for the moon's shimmering pathway. Let's see if we can stay in the light, he said eagerly. It was fun, pushing against the breeze on the rippled water and attempting to stay in the glow. Loons bobbed up nearby and sang out to each other. Laughing, the two reconciled tinies tried to make the call themselves. They congratulated each other when one bird replied. When they reached the far edge of the lake where the breeze blew strongly, Zahir pulled in his oar. Let's drift for a bit, he said. I tried this out today. It's fun. The waves will take us back in. Sitting together with the oars in the boat, the waves gently rocked them side to side. The soft, steady breeze blew Amy's hair around. Happy to be the one sitting close beside her best friend, she smoothed the bumpy scar tissue on the arm she had cared for day after day. How did you not feel all the love I poured into healing these wounds? She teased. The moon was full and bright above the hazy horizon. Zahir took her hand and chuckled. I did feel love, he expressed kindly, but I wasn't sure it was specific to me. You're kind to everyone, and, well, do you know how hard it is to have the one you want to impress see you helpless, smelly, rotting, emotional? It was wonderful to have your care, but sometimes it was, well, humiliating. Does that make any sense?" His voice trailed off. "I just didn't feel worthy." With a sigh, he added, "I thought I was doomed to another rejection." "Is that how you felt?" she mused, having never considered what it might be like to be the helpless patient. "But couldn't you see I was guarding my job jealously?" she laughed. "I finally had the chance to care for you, and I wasn't sharing it with anyone, not even Kenzie." "You weren't just following orders and trying to make up for the accident?" "That was only a small part," she laughed. It was an easy answer at the time. "I know that forgiveness in Christ is what will set me free." "Yes, it will," Zahir agreed with a happy sigh. "Forgiveness is a beautiful concept. I need it too." Resting her head on his shoulder, Amy loved their new closeness and understanding. Leaning against the back of the boat, they looked up at the vast expanse of stars as their red waxed aluminum vessel gently rocked on the flowing water. Out in the middle of the lake, only the black crisscross lines obstructed their view of the heavens. Slowly they drifted toward the shoreline. Suddenly, Zahir said, "You know, maybe I've been seeing this all the wrong way." "What do you mean?" "I'm probably overthinking. Apparently that's my biggest... well, never mind." The dark-haired man shook his head dismissively. "Amy," he said with his loving, somewhat lopsided smile, "I was just thinking that the last time we were close like this, we were both grieving over our losses, our pets, and maybe a few other things." She nodded fervently. "Now, you've just lost Uncle Louis," he said soberly. "Pain is definitely a consequence of losing something or someone you love. But maybe," he speculated in a happier tone, "maybe pain is the trading commodity for love. The deeper you love, the more pain you are required to trade, and you never know when you'll need to bring carrycarts full." "Carrycarts of pain," Amy considered merrily. "I hope we've traded enough to last a long while." Wrapping his arms around her, Zahir sighed happily. "This is so nice, believing that you love me and being here with you. I love you, Amy, more than you know. Regardless of how much it might cost, I'm willing to pay full price." Chapter 47. 2 Prayers. Sitting at his desk, writing his reflections in his journal, the professor was fully aware that a very important conversation was taking place on the pier, one that made him happy beyond words. He didn't go over to look, wanting to give the two tinies some privacy. However, the intense exchange that was drifting quietly over the speakers explained why they had continued to misunderstand one another for so long. Rachel's son and his daughter were finally working things out, and he couldn't be happier. He was astounded that Zahir had felt unworthy of Amy's love and her father's good favor. If only he knew, he sighed, shaking his head. Scribbling all his thoughts on the blank page, he contemplated various things he had learned, now that he saw his experiment in a completely new light. "Even in ideal circumstances," he wrote, as a few teardrops fell on his page, "without any oppression or natural catastrophes, it is possible for people to feel unworthy, unloved, and alone, even when it's not true. Human doubts and fears can keep us from acknowledging love that is real and genuine, regardless of all the strong evidence we see. In an attempt to avoid pain, we may inadvertently cause and receive far more." Pausing thoughtfully in the privacy of the Paradise Room, Jack stared out his window for a few moments before continuing. "We also have a tendency not to trust that our superiors truly want what is best for us, whether that might be our board of directors, teachers, parents, or even our Father in heaven. With his pen poised in the air, he reflected, maybe doubts, fears, and a lack of trust in their father's love caused Adam and Eve to listen to that snake. Some, he wrote, rail against the concept that any higher being should tell us what to do or judge our actions adversely. However, in our desire to live as we please, we may unwittingly place ourselves in bondage to something or someone else, even if it's just our own selfish desires. In brackets, he wrote, me, Odin, Franz. There are others, he continued, who seem content to live their daily lives without any strong pull in any direction. They have much less anxiety and fewer ups and downs, but they may also lack the motivation to dig for treasure. Considering Zahir's new song, which had come across the water and the speakers quite clearly, Jax was thankful the fire had not affected the young man's voice. And then there are those, he wrote, who find great comfort believing there is a higher being who guides our way, gives us hope, and gave us his greatest treasure, his perfect Son, in order to save those who are doomed to death. In brackets, he wrote, Seth, Louis, Zahir, Amy, Kenzie, Evan, Santa, Lima, maybe even Ponzi, Lily, and Vanitha, and now me. He heard Amy explain to Zahir that without the painful mistakes and experiences, she would never have realized how much he meant to her. Suffering brought those two together, he acknowledged. All my feeble attempts to give them fun projects that they could do together only tore them further apart. I would never have chosen a fire, dreadful burns, and weeks of healing, but that's what helped in the end. If we can avoid turning bitter, maybe suffering can help us to appreciate and value the gifts we are given and to recognize true treasure when we find it. Laughter rang out from his beloved daughter and soon-to-be son-in-law as they headed out in the boat. The building board oars slapped quietly against the water. Hearing them laugh together brought such joy to his heart. He sat back in his chair for a while. Overhearing Zahir express that Carrycarts of pain might correspond with the depth of love, Jacques Lemans nodded his head. They do indeed, he acknowledged thoughtfully. Would I have refused 12 happy years with Wendy, had I known it would cost 50 Carrycarts of pain? He shook his head. Sad lors. I never wanted things to end, but if I'd seen a price tag, I would have agreed to pay. So why then did I turn against God? I should have been thanking him for the time he gave me. My beautiful wife was a priceless gift in this fallen world. His thoughts on suffering took him deeper as he considered Evan's comments in an article he had read recently. Jesus chose to suffer for us, he recorded. Jesus went through deeply distressing and painful times. He willingly paid with hundreds of Carrycarts of pain. But now he's in heaven enjoying life with his Father. He will never experience pain, death, or suffering again. And Christians say he is coming back for his bride, the bride for whom he was pierced. Pausing, with his pen in the air, Jax was relieved to hear a happy young man commit to leadership in paradise, now that he was sure that Amy loved him. As the two discussed their plans for the future, they both agreed with Uncle Louis' suggestion that the best way forward was to share God's book with the others. If the gospel message governs everyone's hearts and guides their actions, he heard Zahir tell his daughter, we won't have groups trying to kill each other. We can set the Bible up in our house and invite everyone to come and read it with you, me, and Kenzie. Our house, Amy repeated happily. That has a nice ring to it. It does, he laughed. She considered who else might be interested in reading the Bible with them. I'm sure Ponzi will bring Lily, she said, and Kenzie has good connections with all the farmers. No doubt Vanitha, Santa, and Lima will be eager to come. With a pleased expression, Jax listened as the young couple discussed their ideas. He chuckled when he heard their eager desire to show Google Earth to the others so they could all see the vastness of God's creation and realize the superiority of his power. Wistfully, he jotted a few more notes in his journal. He was pleasantly surprised to hear Zahir say, I'm really thankful Kenzie will be helping us. He's sure and steady and will keep us both grounded. And my parents can teach you to be the best doctors." "All three of us can learn from your parents," Amy encouraged kindly. "They said they don't mind extras joining in, but they really want to share their time and learning with you. They love Yuzi here." "But I've only learned how to be a good patient," he jested. "I can drink when you tell me to and hold back some hollers, if not the tears." Amy laughed. "Actually, I think you will be the best doctor," she determined, "because you've been the patient. You will have real empathy." Then she added, "And besides, as we keep learning about the Bible, we'll have something to share with your parents. It can be a learning experience for all of us." For a moment, Zahir was quiet, and then he said, "Amy, let's pray. I want to thank our Father in heaven for all his good blessings. We both believe we'll see Uncle Louie again and meet Jesus Christ and live forever. And you finally love me the way I always hoped you would. It's awfully nice. You, this new hope, my one good eye, these are my treasures. I'm so happy, Amy. Let's thank him." An email flitted across Jack's screen. Full tribunal hearing scheduled for June 1st. "Treasures," Jax repeated to himself. "I couldn't agree more. They can take away all my money, destroy my reputation and dreams of success, but I still have my tiny family and my close friends. What more can anyone ask than to be loved by loyal friends, to have a hope of life beyond the grave, to live in an incredibly functional body, and to truly know that the Creator of the universe is gracious and kind and wants us to be his children forever. These are priceless gifts that no one, except our own foolish pride or doubtful minds, can take away." As the two tinies began a grateful prayer, Jax leaned forward on his desk with his head in his hands and listened. When they were done, he continued on with his own words. "I'm so sorry, Lord," he pleaded as tears ran down his cheeks. "I have done foolishly. I have been just as stubborn and willingly ignorant as the young man that I removed from paradise. I allowed my anger and bitterness to blind me to all your brilliant designs, to all your faithful provisions and evidence of love. I held tightly to my pain and refused to let it go. I don't know how many students I turned against you, but I confess that I purposely tried to turn away as many as I could. I thought I could do better than you, but I have done so much worse. I have been terribly biased. I have let the tinies down when they needed me the most. And," the professor sobbed, "I tried to persuade my son, my faithful, beloved son, not to investigate. I tried to deny him the opportunity to know you and find salvation. I thank you from the bottom of my heart that your grace was greater than my resistance. You found a way to give your precious hope to Louis in the last few months that he had left to live. I am so, so thankful." Tears poured down Jack's face as he thought of all the accusatory statements he had written and encouraged so many to read. "For all this," he sobbed, "I am not worthy of your mercy. I don't deserve forgiveness. It's hard to believe you could still love me or want to save me. But I recognize that I am a sinner, and your son chose to die to save sinners. I am wrong, and you are right. You are gracious. You are the giver of light and immortality. I should never have tinkered with your creation and miniaturized your children, but you have provided the way to restore them to you. I pray that you would help me to lead all of your precious children to life. Dear Father, please forgive me for these sins and help me to turn things around both in the tinies world and here at the biosphere. May I lead more to you in the future than I've driven away. I ask this in the name of your Son, who willingly chose to endure the terrible pain and give his life for all of us. Amen." It took a while for Jax to regain his composure. While he wiped his face with a tissue, he heard Amy beg to practice to hear his new song with him so they could sing it the next day in remembrance of Uncle Louie. As their voices rang out harmoniously across the water, Jack's Lemans recorded it on his phone. "Wait till the world hears this one," he smiled. Then he emailed Tom Freeman. "I'm ready to do an interview," he typed. "Call me anytime you like. I have made some conclusions that I'd really like to share."
I have found life, I have found faith, I have found God and Jesus Christ, my Lord. I'm never alone, not anymore.
I have found love, I have found care, I have found hope of loved ones raised again. I'm never alone, not anymore.
I found a real Father, the one true Creator. He always sees me, He knows when I fall. I'm never alone, not anymore.
I will see Jesus, He's coming back soon. He gave His life for the world, enduring the pain. I'm never alone, not anymore. So when tears run down my face and my heart wants to break, I'll sing my song joyfully, looking ahead for the day still to come, the day of God's kingdom. I'm never alone, not anymore.